Painted still lifes began with this ancient theme, as you heard, of the brevity of human life, the foolishness of our attachment to material things and sense pleasures. This is an idea that had a long life in the Netherlands. And on the right is the first picture of its kind from the beginning of the century by the brilliant Dutch painter Jacob de Geen. He invents a symbolic language beginning with the oldest symbol of all, that skull, and adds a flower, symbol of beauty and transience. In this case, it's a tulip of that gorgeous striped kind that was being developed right then in the Leiden Botanical Garden. Flanking the tulip is another vase with a bit of smoke coming out of it. Well, these are both Old Testament images, as many members of the audience would know right away, the audience that the picture was painted for. In the book of Job, man comes forth like a flower and is cut down. And also, my days are consumed like smoke. Above the skull is a bubble, another short-lived object of beauty. And flanking the niche are fictive sculptures here of Heraclitus and Democritus, being and laughing philosophers of antiquity. The skull rests on some wisps of dry grass, which recall the prophet Isaiah. All flesh is grass. All the goodliness thereof is as the flower of the field. The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, because the Spirit of the Lord blows upon it. And on the sill, there are coins of the Habsburg Empire. Dutch were in the process of defeating. Should anybody miss the moral of all this, carved into the top of the arch are the words humana vana. Beauty, pleasure, riches, worldly power, all of them come to an end. Peter Klaas, who took up this theme but didn't take up de Geen's diagrammatic way of treating it. Instead, we have, instead of a table, and the skull sits on a book and papers, bridged by feather quill, swooping down to an ink holder. There's a wine glass tipped over. Someone's been here drinking and writing, but it's all finished. The wine of life is gone. Oil lamp, the flame of life has guttered out. What strikes us is how plausible this all looks, how persuasive the glass seems with those reflections of the windows of the room that we're in, and the shine of light on the red glaze of the earthenware lamp, and the crackly texture of the paper. We also see how subtle the shadows are everywhere we look. We see a dance of diagonals in two directions, and we see the skull turned off-center. What looked like a simple setup at first is actually barely in balance. Starting with the glass, you wonder what keeps it there. It could roll off with the least movement, just as the quill could fall with a breath of air. I think with this arrangement, the painter is suggesting that life is not only short, but precarious. This kind of still life appears in many hundreds of inventories in Holland in the 17th century under the title Vanitas. And Peter Klaas made elaborate variations on the theme. The setup here has some of the same stuff as the picture we just saw, plus a violin whose sounds, after all, are heard for only a brief moment and then fade, like life itself. There's a pocket watch down there, too, a pretty new invention that appears in many still lifes through the centuries, counting out the hours. The novelty here is the glass ball, a stand-in for the soap bubble that you saw in the painting by de Geen a moment ago. It reflects the still life on the table. You can see the violin and other things. Room beyond, with its door and window, and the artist himself at the easel painting the very picture we're looking at. So the painter is showing off here, demonstrating that his mind is nimble enough to employ two systems of describing the world at once: conventional one-point perspective for the table and spherical wide-angle projection in the globe. He lets the spectator comprehend more of the world around him than she could with the painter's help. Well, this is a trick Klaas doesn't perform again. He turns from this kind of hermetic and self-referential world and becomes a kind of virtuoso of consumption. He paints tables that appear ready for us, the viewers. Now, this is a display of good things for us to look at, arranged with no functional order, but with a lot going on visually. There are shapes and colors and textures, terrific variety, organized symmetrically. Their basic shapes, of course, are ovals, which you can see everywhere. There's a vertical center line here, and to the left of that, candy plate. Over here to the right, the bread. To the left, again, the olives. And to the right, another plate, and so forth. A serving spoon to the left, and to the knife to the right. Not incidentally, diagonals that converge, making a big triangle. So formally, the picture is tightly thought through. We get a very good view of this layout on the table because our point of view is rather high. We're looking down at the table. And I think certain things are there just to intrigue you. And there's the lemon, which in still lives all through the century steals the show. Most often the lemon has been partly peeled by somebody with the skill to make the peel form a kind of continuous helix. The peeled lemon, in fact, becomes a kind of pulsary figure in competition among still life painters for grace and precision. The nubbly top as already sliced, so we can savor the look of the translucent lemon flesh with the pewter actually visible through it and see the lemon's reflection in the surface. The more you look, the more you see. Well, if this is food for thought, what did the artist want his audience to think about indulgence and its dangers? And some people might indeed have thought that way. I imagine that ideas about order and disorder might arise. Likeliest train of thought, I think, is that this food won't last long. Pie and the bread and the olives and the lemon will be eaten or be given to servants or be thrown out to decompose. They'll be gone, but not the painting. The painting will survive, and it'll go on teasing and amazing people long after the food and the people who ate it are gone. Peter Klaas didn't invent this kind of still life we've been looking at with food and drink on the table. He inherited it, and he made it more complex and subtle.